Let's get straight to it. So in Tshwane this hour, the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry continues today on day 6, examining corruption, crime and political interference within South Africa's police service. Now, more witnesses are expected to testify following the last statement by National Police Commissioner General Fannie Masemola. For the latest updates on this now, we go live to SABC News anchor Ayanda Nyathi, who's at the Bridgette Mabandla Justice College in Tshwane for us. So Ayanda, much speculation around who's likely to be the next witness, but also what they are likely to focus on, which is likely to be the legislative framework that governs the operations there at SAPS. Let's hear more.
Absolutely, Mko. We're still waiting for that name, and I hope that should be forthcoming in the next couple of minutes, given the fact that we'll start at around 9:30. But you're absolutely right. Whoever they are, there's going to be a lot of focus, we anticipate, on that legislative framework governing the work of the SAPS, as you've mentioned. And I suppose, given the fact that there was a break yesterday, it's worth just reminding our viewers for a moment what Fannie Masemola had to say, in part, on day 2 of his testimony on Tuesday. He spent a considerable amount of time speaking about the events that led up to the disbandment of the political killings task team, who was involved and what he reckoned the motive might have been. In fact, at some stage, he spoke about how he was taken aback by the now suspended minister's response to the work being done by the PKTT. Take a listen.
It's quite strange it was first in my career to see a minister angry that police have done a good job, because here police have arrested somebody that is linked to the killing of a councillor, and he was angry and that they took over this docket, that as one was trying to manage this process, looking for the real reason that never came for why is the team disbanded. And eventually, after the arrest of Nhlanhla on the 14th of May 2025, it became clear as to what was the objective for the disbandment.
So there you have it, the police chief saying that he was surprised that the now suspended minister was seemingly angry that police were ultimately doing their jobs. I suppose it's a good way to segue into the kind of commentary that we might anticipate here surrounding enhancing accountability and oversight. And it's in that world that questions around the legal framework or the legislative framework steps in. Let's bring in part of our team once again with us. Andy Mashaile is a security strategist. Kenny Mapanga is a reporter who's been watching those developments for us. Thanks once again for sticking around in some ways. Let me start with you. Can you help us place, I suppose, the significance of what we're likely to hear today?
The crux of the issue today is the question of whether the decision to disband the PKTT was a policy decision or was it an encroachment on the SAPS National Commissioner's mandate. I think the legislative framework is quite clear in creating a distinction between the two roles and their responsibilities within policing in South Africa. If you read the SAPS Act together with the Constitution, it creates a role for the minister as the accountability partner, the one that creates the national policy directives for the police. And then if you read the Constitution together with the SAPS Act, it's very clear that the SAPS National Commissioner has control over the operations of policing in South Africa, to the extent of even appointments. So when you hear Mkhwanazi saying that he doesn't report to the minister, he only reports to the SAPS National Commissioner, he's correct, because the legislative framework provides that the commissioner can appoint provincial commissioners. So essentially the question there is to determine if this kind of directive can fall within the ambit of a policy decision, and if it can, to what extent can the minister exercise that power. The impression that we're getting from the testimony is that this was a figure that was centered only on the disbandment of the PKTT, and that the decision was taken without consultation, without speaking to the National Commissioner, without taking into consideration the kind of successes of the PKTT in the work that it had done. And we know that for such a decision to be rational, what it needs to be preceded by is this particular process that almost rationalizes the decision in order for you to reach the conclusion that it no longer adds quote-unquote value to policing in South Africa. But what we're seeing, even with current cases right now, is that this particular team plays a critical role in resolving this issue of political killings, not only in KZN, but have also looked at Forte murders as well, and they've also looked at traditional healers, those cases as well. And then, of course, spilling over into Gauteng with the alleged drug cartel movement or operation in the Gauteng province, which eventually led to their challenges, which brings us here today.
Sure. Shall we perhaps, Andy Mashaile, speak about the process so far? We've heard from the main complainant, we've heard from the police chief, and now I suppose we're taking a moment to understand the ecosystem in which they work. As a security strategist yourself, to what extent does this aid paint the picture around what actually might have taken place in the wake of the allegations we've heard so far?
Analyzing the ecosystem would then make it easier for the men in the street to understand exactly how do you unpack your roles and responsibilities. Remember, the SAPS operates and is established according to SAPS Act 68 of 1995. And that act has enabling regulations. So today, if we go into the ecosystem and analyze the ecosystem, we would go into the regulations. What powers does the minister have with regard to taking a marked police van with a call sign and drive that vehicle into a community and say, I am here to arrest Ayanda? Does the minister have the right to drive that vehicle, that marked vehicle with blue lights on? These are some of the things that makes it easier for you and I and Kenny to can then apply a mind that says the minister was right by instructing the National Commissioner to disband the PKTT. If the minister does not have that right to drive a marked vehicle with a blue light on and actually get into the boots on the ground analogy kind of powers, then it would mean that the only person between the two of them who jump into a marked vehicle and drive on the freeway and do the actual chasing of criminals, it would be the National Commissioner, because he is responsible for the operations and he might actually lead an operation himself. So long story short, the ecosystem speaks to us, policy speaks to us regulations that enable legislation as coming from policy to can be effected in ensuring that the tools, in this case the team that have been designed and developed and established to both to create, to prevent crime, to combat crime, and to lead to prosecution. Now crossing the border into your NPAs from the prosecutorial point of view, that responsibility falls within the office of the National Commissioner.
Yeah, see you nodding away.
It's important to note that even if you have that power, even if that power exists, you can't just exercise it unilaterally without valid reason to do so. You're seeing a PKTT where it has been explained that it was established to address this prevailing problem of political violence in the KwaZulu-Natal province. Its work was not done yet to reach a conclusion that political violence no longer exists and can only be reduced to just murders, because we know that these cases are directly related related to the political landscape of South Africa. So this is issues and infighting in political parties, party-to-party disputes, what may happen in local municipalities, and you have Advocate Elaine Harrison herself of the KZN DPP raising the alarm, stating that we're heading to the local government elections. We see these kinds of cases all the time, and we anticipate that these cases are going to come forth come the 2026 local government elections. So for a decision like that to be rational, it must follow a rational process and have sound reasons. You've heard General Masemola stating that he wasn't even given documentation, research, science, evidence, anything to point to this decision being rational other than the objective that he reaches, or rather he finds to be the reason behind it, which is this arrest of these two key figures that form part of this alleged organized crime syndicates in Gauteng. But even if the power does extend to him, there's still an analysis on that as to whether he exercised it lawfully, not just to make a unilateral decision just because you have the power as a minister.
And we know part of ensuring that the decision and the powers are executed lawfully involves a certain level of consultation that needs to take place. And the sense we're getting, at least from Fannie Masemola's testimony, is that there was very little of that. In fact, there was a very hasty intention to have this PKTT disbanded, at least once again, insofar as the allegations are concerned.
That is a serious cause for concern if the operative in the form of the National Commissioner and the process owner of the department being the minister, if they don't talk when it comes to issues of crime prevention as well as crime combating, there is a serious cause for concern for the organization to operate effectively and efficiently. My sense, based on what Ntate Masemola was saying, is that the minister was saying, I don't see you as part and parcel of the team that I am leading as the minister, as the owner of the department. Now, from a process point of view, from an operational process point of view, there is no way in which a pastor in a church can suddenly make decisions without having had consulted with the council of the church or the deacon on that particular day, so that the sermon flows from the deacon until up to the pastor. So long story short, it is concerning. I am sure if it was an oversight on the minister, it will lead to a situation where the minister in future will then have to consult. I am sure there will be some new methodologies that would then force the process to be that should there be any decision that comes from the minister or that is expected from the minister's office, the minister will then have to call in the National Commissioner and say, partner, you are operations and policy, let's talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we can achieve A, B, C, D, F, G.
So interesting you say that, because I think there is a lot of invested interest in ensuring we don't get here once again or get back to this moment, because we have been here before, and I think that's part of what bleeds into the cynicism from South Africans watching this commission, who are asking, where do we need to tighten up, if anywhere, in order to make sure there isn't another inquiry in 5 years to discuss the lines of demarcation insofar what a minister can and cannot do before they seem to be encroaching?
I think the legislative framework, particularly this one, the SAPS Act, read together with the Constitution, is quite clear on the responsibilities and roles of the two different roles within policing. I think where the vagueness comes in is that it may be open to manipulation because it's not clear as to how far that power extends. Because one could create a defense that when the decision to disband the PKTT was made, that it was a policy directive for national policing. But then you could also get another argument from SAPS, high-ranking SAPS officials, that this decision went into the realm of their direct operations and it could not have been taken or at least considered without looking into the direct operations of the PKTT, the kind of work it was doing, the prevailing problem it was addressing. Because one could argue that for the PKTT to be disbanded, you would have had to have solved the actual cause that it was created for in the first place.
Yeah, and we know currently the minister saying that there were no political killings after 1994.
We're hearing, at least from General Masemola, that that is not the case. He worked from 2000 to 2010, and he saw that prevailing issue. The Madlanga Commission is not something that came pre-1994. The findings were made in 2018, and that was directly focused on the underlying root cause behind the political violence in KwaZulu-Natal. So that issue is, you would have to have resolved that issue in order for a PKTT team like that to be disbanded. So that is the rational process that people are speaking about when they say when you take a decision, for it to be lawful, it still needs to follow a rational process. And it seems like that in this particular case, or at least what is alleged, is that there was a rushed process to ensure that this PKTT is disbanded quite quickly, and that the National Commissioner himself wasn't even consulted. Even seeing the minister at a funeral prior to the decision being made, there was no mention of this imminent decision that he describes as drastic, that is General Masemola, and he had no knowledge of it until it was put out into the public space, before those who were even responsible for this particular team could actually digest what was taking place.
All right, Kenny Mapanga, our reporter here at the Bridgette Mabandla Justice College, as well as Andy Mashaile, a security strategist. We'll be watching very closely to hear how day 6 of this inquiry unfolds as soon as the third witness, who's yet to be named in public, takes to the hot seat. Mkhwa?
Tell you what, Ayanda, we're certainly looking forward to all of that and more coming up. And that's, of course, our Ayanda Nyathi, alongside Kenny Mapanga there, just hard at work, bringing us up to speed with all of those proceedings there that are likely to start at 9:30 sharp. We'll be taking you there as and when they get underway.